This story begins when the lights go out. Not the metaphorical kind, real ones. The dull hum of the refrigerator fades, the air grows still, and a man named Daniel sits alone at a small kitchen table, staring at a stack of unopened envelopes. Bills, red letters, numbers that feel heavier than gravity itself. He runs a hand through his hair and whispers, "Next month will be better." He's said that for the last 19 months. You've probably met someone like Daniel before. Maybe you've been Daniel, someone who works hard, follows the rules, but somehow is still losing. He wakes up before sunrise, not because he's disciplined, but because his anxiety doesn't let him sleep. The city outside is quiet, but inside his mind it's a storm: rent, gas, groceries, minimum payments, overdraft fees. He checks his phone. The balance reads 47 Mevin 26. Payday is 4 days away. It's the same rhythm every week: survive until Friday, breathe for 1 day, and start sinking again by Monday. His job isn't bad, it's honest work. But it feels like being on a treadmill with the speed slightly increasing every month. Inflation, bills, repairs, everything pulls him backward while he's trying to move forward. He remembers something his father said years ago: "If you just work hard, you'll be fine." But that was before the world changed, before rent cost half a paycheck, before hard work meant surviving, not living. At night, Daniel scrolls through social media, watching strangers in bigger houses and better clothes. He knows most of it is fake, but it still burns. A quiet resentment builds in him, not toward them, but toward himself. Why can't I figure this out? He doesn't gamble. He doesn't waste money, but somehow it's never enough. Every decision feels like a trade-off between today's comfort and tomorrow's survival. He stops at a gas station one night, filling his car just enough to reach work the next few days. A teenager next to him laughs on the phone, talking about investing and crypto. Daniel doesn't even know what that means. He feels old, though he's only 32. He drives home past a billboard that reads, "You deserve more." He laughs out loud, bitterly. The truth is, being poor isn't just about not having money. It's about the exhaustion of always thinking about money. Every purchase becomes a mental math problem. Every invitation a negotiation between guilt and desire. Every dream postponed until later, a later that never comes. Poverty teaches people to be creative in ways no business school ever could. Daniel knows how to stretch leftovers into meals, how to fix things with tape and patience, how to smile through shame. But poverty also teaches fear. Fear of the next flat tire, fear of getting sick, fear of one bad week becoming a bad year, and worst of all, fear of hope. Because hope costs energy, and when you're barely surviving, even hope feels like a luxury. One evening, Daniel meets his old friend Lisa for coffee. She's always been optimistic, annoyingly so. She talks about new projects, new ideas, new beginnings. "Dan, you ever think about doing something different?" she asks. He forces a smile. "Like what? I can't just quit," she shrugs. "Not quit, just start thinking differently." Her words sting not because they're cruel, but because they sound too simple. Thinking differently doesn't pay rent. But that night, as Daniel lies awake staring at the cracked ceiling, those words echo. Start thinking differently. He doesn't know what it means yet, but something stirs a faint irritation that feels suspiciously like curiosity. Weeks pass. The lights stay on, barely. The bills keep coming, but Daniel begins noticing things he used to ignore. He realizes how often he spends to escape discomfort: coffee when tired, takeout when sad, streaming subscriptions to fill the silence, tiny leaks, invisible drains. He starts asking questions no one ever taught him to ask. Why do I always end up with nothing left? Where does it all actually go? What would happen if I just stopped pretending everything was fine? It's not enlightenment, it's more like frustration transforming into awareness. There's a moment one night, small but pivotal. Daniel's car breaks down. Again. He sits by the roadside, engine smoking, phone battery at 2%. And for the first time, instead of panicking, he just breathes. He looks at the empty road ahead and whispers, "This can't be it. There has to be more than this. It's not a prayer, it's a decision. A silent one, buried beneath exhaustion, but it's there. The kind of decision that doesn't look powerful at the time, yet becomes the seed of everything that comes after. Because financial change never begins with money. It begins with a moment when surviving stops being enough. And for Daniel, that moment has just begun. Morning light creeps through Daniel's curtains like a reluctant promise. It's been a year since the night he sat by that broken down car. The lights still flicker sometimes, but something inside him has shifted. He's not rich, not even close, but he's no longer drowning. He can breathe, even if it's shallow breaths. He's learned to survive. And in this stage of life, survival feels like progress. He keeps a notebook now, not for dreams, but for numbers. Every expense, every paycheck, every bit of debt. At first it felt like punishment, facing the ugly math of his habits. But slowly, numbers became less like monsters and more like mirrors. He realizes his problem was never money itself, it was not knowing. The not knowing that breeds panic, that keeps people blind, that turns every financial decision into emotional roulette. So he watches, he tracks, he pays attention. He cuts out the waste, the pointless subscriptions, the lunches that cost more than they taste, the emotional shopping that numbs and drains. He finds quiet pride in making coffee at home, in cooking for himself, in walking instead of driving when he can. It's not glamorous, but for the first time, he feels control. Still, there's a strange emptiness in control. When you've been struggling for so long, simply having enough doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like a fragile truce. Daniel now has a little cushion in his bank account, enough to cover an emergency, enough to sleep at night. But he also realizes something unexpected. Enough can be its own kind of trap, because enough can lull you into comfort, and comfort can quietly become stagnation. He works, saves, pays bills, repeats. The fear that once ruled his life is gone, replaced by a low-grade monotony. There are no fires to put out, but no spark either. He starts wondering, is this all life is meant to be? Working to stay in one place? One evening, at a small dinner gathering, he listens to Lisa talk about a project she's launching. She speaks with energy, hands moving, eyes bright. He admires that in her. After dinner she says, "You look better, Dan. More stable." He laughs softly. "Yeah, I guess. Things aren't falling apart anymore." "That's good," she says. Then after a pause, "But are they coming together?" Her question hits harder than he expects, because deep down, he knows the answer. Daniel's days are predictable now, predictable in the way that feels safe but heavy. He wakes up, commutes, works, comes home, eats and scrolls. Weekends blur together. Laundry, errands, Netflix, maybe a drink with a friend. There's no drama, no crisis, but there's no meaning either. The stability he once prayed for now feels like a cage made of comfort. He begins noticing people around him, colleagues, neighbours who live the same pattern. Same conversations, same routines, same unspoken exhaustion. It's a quiet epidemic, people surviving efficiently, while their dreams decay slowly in the background. He realises money isn't the only thing people run out of. They also run out of why. One afternoon he's sitting in a park with his lunch, scrolling through his phone. He sees an article titled "The Cost of Comfort." It talks about how people trade potential for predictability, how fear of losing enough stops them from reaching more. He reads it twice. The next day he takes a different route home. Not for any reason, just to see something new. The city feels alive again, like he's been walking through it half asleep. That night, he opens his notebook, the same one filled with numbers, and writes a single question on a blank page. What would it take to build instead of just survive? He doesn't have the answer, but the question alone feels like oxygen. Over the next few months, Daniel begins experimenting. He reads books, listens to podcasts, not the motivational kind that promise millions overnight, but the ones that talk about principles, habits, psychology, value. He learns that money doesn't multiply through luck or hustle alone. It grows through perspective, through patience, through learning how to let money work instead of constantly working for it. He opens a small investment account, terrified, cautious, but curious. He starts tiny, like dipping his toes into cold water. For the first time, his money is not just leaving, it's doing something, and that realization changes everything. Still, the growth is slow. Progress is invisible. No one claps when you make your first $10 in returns. No one sees the discipline behind saying no to temporary pleasures for long-term peace. But Daniel begins to feel something he hasn't felt in years: momentum. He sees how every stage of life has its own illusion. When he was poor, he thought money would solve everything. Now that he's stable, he realizes mindset solves more than money ever could. Because the real poverty isn't lack of cash, it's lack of curiosity. One night, he writes another line in his notebook: I'm no longer afraid of being broke. I'm afraid of staying the same. He doesn't know it yet, but that's the moment. His journey shifts again. The transition from surviving to building begins quietly, almost invisibly, the way dawn begins. Long before the sun rises, he closes the notebook, turns off the light, and for the first time, he doesn't dread tomorrow. He's not rich, not yet, but he's no longer lost either. He's standing at the threshold, the thin line between enough to live and the possibility of something greater. And on the other side of that line, the real transformation waits. It starts quietly, not with a windfall, not with a raise, not with some miracle investment. It starts with a shift, a mental one. Daniel begins to see patterns in everything: how people talk about money, how fear disguises itself as responsibility, how comfort pretends to be wisdom. He notices how often people say, I can't afford that, when what they really mean is, I don't believe I could ever have that. He starts questioning his own sentences too, the ones that begin with, I wish, and end with excuses. It's not arrogance that's growing in him, it's awareness. And awareness is dangerous because once you see things differently, you can never go back. It begins on an ordinary Saturday. Daniel walks into a bookstore, mostly to kill time. But he drifts toward a section he's always ignored: personal finance. He picks up a book, The Psychology of Money. He flips through a few pages and stops on a line that reads, Wealth is what you don't see. It's the car not purchased, the clothes not bought, the dinners skipped. Something clicks. He realizes he's been measuring success by what's visible, by what others display. But real wealth, like peace, lives in silence. He buys the book, then another, and another. His Netflix account grows dusty, while his notebook fills with ideas. He begins treating his money like a partner instead of an enemy. Every dollar has a job. Some work today bills, rent, food. Some work tomorrow's savings, investments. Some work forever, the dollars that grow while he sleeps. It's not about greed, it's about choice. He's learning the most freeing lesson of all, that money buys time, not things. Time to think, time to create, time to say no. And when you can say no, you start to live differently. His co-workers notice the difference. He's calmer, quieter, more deliberate. At lunch, someone jokes, What's your secret, Dan? You look like you found inner peace or something. He smiles. I just stopped letting stress rent space in my head for free. They laugh, but he means it. Lisa visits, again, curious as ever. She's been watching Daniel's slow transformation, skeptical at first, then inspired. They meet at a park this time, not a cafe. He brings his own coffee, homemade. You've changed, she says. He nods. Maybe I just stopped believing I was stuck. Stuck in what? He looks at her. In the story I told myself about money. that it controlled me. She leans back, thinking. And now? Now I see it's just energy. It flows where you direct it. It's the first time he's said that out loud, and it feels strange, like speaking a truth he's only recently learned to believe. The months roll by and Daniel starts experimenting more. He learns about investing, compound growth, and the power of patience. He opens an index fund, reads quarterly reports, and realizes something profound. The rich don't think in days or weeks, they think in decades. He starts applying that lens to everything. Relationships, skills, health. Suddenly his decisions stop being about quick fixes and start being about legacy. But progress, as always, tests you. One night, Daniel gets a call his mother's car broke down. She needs help. A few years ago, that kind of call would have wrecked him. Now he sighs, opens his emergency fund, and covers the cost. He doesn't feel the old panic. He feels gratitude, because he finally understands what security feels like. Not luxury, not abundance, but stability earned through intention. It's not just about having the money, it's about becoming the kind of person who can handle it. Still, a deeper hunger begins to rise. Daniel starts seeing how many people are still where he once was good. Hard-working people, trapped in cycles of survival. He begins talking to them, not preaching, just sharing. Co-workers, cousins, friends. He tells them what he's learned, that money doesn't change until you do. That poverty is often a mindset passed down like a family heirloom. That you can't invest what you don't understand, and you can't understand what you won't face. Some listen, some roll their eyes, but that's okay. Because Daniel isn't trying to convince anyone anymore. He's building something that can't be seen, yet a foundation under his feet. He also starts noticing the difference between being busy and being productive. He cuts back on overtime and uses that time to learn new skills, basic accounting, digital marketing, even negotiation. He takes a small freelance gig on the side, something creative, something that sparks joy instead of dread. The extra money isn't life-changing, but the confidence is. It reminds him that his income isn't fixed. It's flexible, expandable, alive. Then one evening, he writes another line in his notebook. The goal isn't to be rich, the goal is to be free. He stares at that sentence for a long time, because for the first time in his life, it feels real. Freedom used to sound like a fantasy, something reserved for other people. Now it feels like a direction, a compass. He closes the notebook and looks around his apartment, small, simple, but peaceful. He realizes the room hasn't changed much. He has, and that makes all the difference. It's late when he turns off the light. Through the window, the city glows hundreds of lives, hundreds of stories, each person chasing their version of enough. Daniel lies awake, not anxious anymore, but alive. He can feel something building inside him, a quiet momentum, a sense that life isn't happening to him anymore, but with him. He smiles because he finally understands the truth, that wealth begins long before the bank account changes. It begins the moment you stop seeing money as survival and start seeing it as possibility. And from that moment on, Daniel's story begins to expand from managing to creating. The first spark of real change has been lit. There's a saying Daniel reads one morning: if you want to change your life, change what you measure. He doesn't know why that line hits so deeply, but it does. Because for most of his life, he measured success by survival. Now he's starting to measure something else: growth. It's been 3 years since the night by the roadside, the night he whispered, "There has to be more than this." And there is. But it didn't come easily. It came through quiet mornings reading before work, through saying no to things he couldn't afford, through learning the slow language of patience. He's no longer chasing quick money. He's building strong habits. Every month he invests a small piece of his paycheck automatically. He barely thinks about it anymore. It's part of his rhythm, like brushing his teeth or locking the door. He still lives modestly, still tracks every expense, But there's a quiet confidence in his tone. Now the kind of peace that comes when you finally understand the rules of a game you've been losing your whole life. Daniel begins teaching others what he's learned not as a guru, but as a friend. At work, he starts casual lunch sessions called Money Talks. It's not about stocks or markets. It's about mindset, about how to stop being afraid of money, how to use it with purpose. He tells them stories instead of instructions. The time he almost broke down because of a car repair. The day he realized debt wasn't shame, it was information. The night he stopped pretending everything was fine and started tracking every dollar. People listen. Some take notes, some cry. And Daniel realizes something powerful. Wealth shared becomes wisdom. His relationship with Lisa also evolves. They're closer now partners in more ways than one. She's been watching his transformation for years, quietly inspired. One evening, as they cook dinner together, she says, "You ever think about doing something bigger with all this?" He looks up from the cutting board. "Bigger?" "Yeah," she says, smiling. "You've learnt so much. Maybe it's time to build something that helps others." Her words hang in the air, like a challenge. Daniel doesn't answer right away, but that night, he can't sleep. He starts thinking about all the people who never got the chance to learn what he did, the ones still trapped in cycles of scarcity, the ones who never realized they could rewrite their story. He begins writing blog posts, small essays, reflections. He writes about what it feels like to grow up fearing the mailbox, about the psychology of not enough, about how money, when handled consciously, becomes a mirror of the soul. His words spread quietly online. A few readers, then a few dozen, then hundreds. One person emails him, "You helped me stop feeling stupid about money. For the first time, I feel like I can breathe." Daniel stares at that message for a long time, tears burning in his eyes, because that's what he'd always wanted, not to be rich, but to be free, and to help others find freedom too. Meanwhile, his financial world keeps expanding, not explosively, but steadily. He's learned to diversify. He builds multiple streams, small freelance income, investments, a savings plan. He stops chasing trends and focuses on consistency. He studies how systems work, taxes, compounding, real estate, not to show off, but to understand how wealth actually functions. He sees that the game was never rigged, it was just hidden behind complexity. He learns to simplify it piece by piece. But success doesn't erase struggle, it transforms it. One day his company announces layoffs. Old fear flickers inside him, that old familiar panic, but then he breathes calmly. He's ready this time. He has 6 months of expenses saved, investments still growing. He doesn't beg the universe to save him. He prepares to pivot. He takes a week off. He thinks, reflects, reconnects with his values. By the second week, he's building his own small business coaching people in financial wellness. Not as a get-rich scheme, but as a way to teach self-respect through numbers. Because money, he's realized, is emotional, and the people who master emotion are the ones who master wealth. His first few clients pay little. Some pay nothing, but Daniel treats each session like gold. He listens, really listens. He sees pieces of his old self in each person. The fear, the denial, the exhaustion. He doesn't give them advice at first. He gives them questions. What story do you tell yourself about money? When did you first learn to feel afraid of it? What would freedom look like for you? Sometimes they cry before they answer, because no one ever asked them that before. As the business grows, so does Daniel's understanding of wealth. He sees that being rich isn't a number, it's a state of awareness. It's knowing that every dollar has power. It's knowing that time, once wasted, is the most expensive currency of all. He learns to balance ambition with gratitude, to work hard, but also to rest without guilt. He and Lisa move into a slightly bigger apartment, not luxurious, but filled with light. They host dinners, invite friends, talk about dreams instead of debts. It feels surreal, not because life is perfect, but because it's intentional. One evening, Daniel looks at his reflection in the window. The skyline glows behind him. He remembers that man sitting in the dark years ago, whispering that things would get better. He wishes he could reach back through time and tell him, "You were right. It did get better, but not because luck changed, because you did." He smiles softly, because breaking the cycle wasn't about escaping poverty. It was about escaping the belief that he couldn't. That night, he writes one last line in his old notebook, now worn and stained. Discipline built the bridge. Patience carried me across. Purpose keeps me walking. He closes it gently. The notebook that once tracked his survival has now recorded his evolution. And though he's still on his journey, one truth has become clear. Wealth doesn't begin with money. It begins with courage, the courage to stop surviving and start building. Daniel exhales, the city buzzing softly below. He feels light, focused, free. Tomorrow, he'll wake early, not out of fear, but out of choice, because the cycle is broken. And on the other side of survival, the architecture of abundance begins. Wealth doesn't arrive with a drum roll. It creeps in quietly, disguised as peace. That's how Daniel first notices it, not through a number in his bank account, but through silence, the absence of panic, the calm before choices. He wakes up one morning and realizes he hasn't worried about bills in months. He hasn't flinched at unexpected costs or checked his balance before buying groceries. The constant background noise of fear, the hum of what if is gone. That's what wealth feels like. Not louder, quieter. Years have passed. Daniel's coaching business has grown into something steady, honest, and deeply human. He's not the richest man in the city, far from it, but he's wealthy in every meaningful sense. He owns his time. He chooses his work. He spends his days doing what once felt impossible, helping others break free. And maybe that's what real wealth is, when your life stops being a reaction and starts being a creation. It's a Tuesday morning when Daniel walks through his small office downtown. He stops by the whiteboard where he's written a simple phrase, "Teach what you needed most when you were younger." That sentence has guided everything. His team, small but passionate, helps ordinary people rebuild their financial lives from the inside out. No flashy ads, no promises of overnight riches, just transformation, the slow kind that sticks. He watches a young client named Mia sitting in the consultation room, tears welling up as she says, "I never realized I was scared of money. I thought I was just bad with it." Daniel smiles softly. "You're not bad with it," he says. "You just never learned to make it your friend." She nods, writing that down like a revelation. Outside, the city hums, same streets, same chaos, but Daniel feels a quiet separation from it. He's still part of the world, but no longer owned by it. He buys what he wants now, but rarely wants much. His joy doesn't come from spending, but from selecting. Every choice is deliberate, every purchase connected to purpose. He's learned the paradox of wealth. The richer you get inside, the less you need outside. That weekend, Daniel and Lisa take a walk through the old neighborhood where he used to live, the tiny apartment, the corner store, the flickering street light that always buzzed. He stops in front of the old building and stares for a moment. "Feels like a lifetime ago," she says. He nods. It was. They stand there in silence, the weight of memory pressing softly against the present. Then Lisa asks, "Do you miss it?" He laughs. "Miss being broke?" "No," she smiles. "Miss who you were then?" He thinks for a long time before answering. "I miss the hunger," he says finally. "The part of me that was desperate enough to change." She nods. "But that hunger built everything." He looks at her. "Yeah, and I never want to forget it." That night, he can't sleep again, not out of anxiety this time, but gratitude. He sits by the window, city lights painting his face. He opens a new notebook, the latest in a series of many, and writes, "Wealth is not a destination, it's a relationship. You grow it like love through attention, honesty, and care." He stares at that line and smiles, because now he understands what money truly is. A reflection of alignment. When your values, habits, and vision align, money becomes effortless. When they don't, money becomes chaos. But just as he settled into this rhythm, life tests him again. One of his biggest clients backs out unexpectedly. The business loses nearly 40% of its revenue in a week. His staff panics. Old Daniel would have spiraled. He would have frozen, convinced it was over. This Daniel doesn't flinch. He gathers his team. "We've lost something," he says, "but not everything. We've lost comfort. Maybe that's good. Comfort made us lazy." They rebuild. They innovate. They adapt. And within months the business returns stronger, leaner, sharper. It's not luck. It's resilience, the kind that money alone can't buy. Daniel starts speaking publicly. Small conferences, workshops, schools. He tells stories, not formulas. He shares the mistakes, the shame, the exhaustion, and how facing those emotions was the first step to freedom. He tells people, wealth doesn't start when you make more money. It starts when you make fewer excuses. The crowd always goes silent at that line. Because it's not an insult, it's a mirror. He travels more now, not for escape, but for expansion. He sees poverty in many forms, not just financial, but emotional, spiritual. And everywhere he goes, the same truth echoes. People aren't broken. They're just uninformed, untrained, unhealed. So he builds programs that teach financial literacy through psychology, through empathy. He partners with schools, non-profits, communities. He invests not in products, but in people. He's no longer chasing return on investment. He's chasing return on impact. One evening, after a long day, Daniel sits with Lisa on the balcony of their modest home overlooking the city. The air is cool, the lights shimmer below. Lisa leans her head on his shoulder. "You ever think about what's next?" she asks. He smiles. "Always." "But don't you ever want to stop? Just enjoy it?" He looks at her thoughtful. "I am enjoying it," he says, "but this isn't about more money anymore. It's about meaning. I think wealth without meaning is just numbers." She nods, understanding. He continues softly. "When I was poor, I wanted money to survive. When I had enough, I wanted money to grow. But now I want it to matter." They sit in silence for a while. The city hums beneath them, same as it always has. Daniel feels the strange full-circle truth settling in his chest. He's still that same man, from the kitchen table years ago, but now, the fear that once consumed him has become purpose. He doesn't chase freedom anymore. He lives it, because wealth in its truest form isn't about escaping something. It's about becoming someone who can give, guide, and grow without fear. He closes his eyes and breathes deeply. He can almost hear his younger self whisper, "Next month will be better." And this time, the words aren't a desperate hope. They're a quiet promise, because now they always are. This story began when the lights went out. Now they glow gently in a quiet home, filled with warmth, not the kind money buys, but the kind that comes from peace. Daniel sits at the same kind of table he once feared. Only now, the stack of bills has been replaced with letters from clients. Handwritten thank yous, small notes that say things like, "You changed how I see myself," or "I finally paid off my debt." He runs his fingers over them slowly, as if touching proof that the past was real. He smiles, because it was, and without it, none of this would exist. He's 50 now. His hair is streaked with grey, his voice slower, deeper. The business has grown into something far larger than he ever imagined, an organisation that helps thousands of people each year learn financial resilience, emotional intelligence, and the art of choice. But success hasn't changed him much. He still wakes early, still makes coffee the same way, still writes in a notebook every morning. Today's entry reads, "Rich is not a number, it's a feeling of enough." He looks out the window and smiles, because he finally understands what enough really means. Years ago, enough meant survival, paying the bills, avoiding chaos, staying afloat. Then enough meant security, saving, planning, building. Now, Enough means freedom not from work, but from fear. He no longer measures life by what he earns or owns. He measures it by how lightly he carries it. He knows that true wealth is invisible. It's the peace you feel when the world gets noisy. It's the ability to walk away from anything that steals your joy. It's knowing you could have more, but choosing less because you already have what matters. One afternoon, Daniel visits a community centre his foundation funds. Kids are learning about money, not the arithmetic, but the meaning. A young boy, no older than 12, raises his hand and asks, "Why do people care so much about money?" Daniel kneels down and answers softly, "Because they think it's the key, but really, it's just a door. What matters is what you walk into." The boy nods thoughtfully, and Daniel sees himself that same confusion, that same spark of curiosity that once saved him. Later that day, he walks through the city, the same one that once intimidated him. He passes by old bus stops, small shops, restaurants that used to be too expensive for him. The world looks the same, but he doesn't, because once your perspective changes, everything else follows. He remembers a time when he measured his worth by his wallet, when happiness seemed like something other people could afford. Now he knows the real currency is clarity. When you see clearly about money, about fear, about yourself, you become unstoppable. That evening, Daniel sits with Lisa on their porch, the sun melting behind the horizon. She's flipping through an old photo album, the one from their early days. "Remember this?" She laughs, pointing to a photo of them in his tiny apartment, holding cheap takeouts and smiling like fools. He laughs. "I remember thinking we were poor." "We were," she says. "Yeah," he nods. "But I also think we were rich, we just didn't know it." She tilts her head. "Rich in what?" "In hope," he says. "In hunger. In everything that pushes you forward." She leans against him, eyes soft. "You still have that hunger?" He looks at her and smiles. "Always. But it's not desperation anymore. It's purpose." When night falls, Daniel walks back inside, alone for a moment. The air feels still, that same stillness he once feared now feels sacred. He pulls out his first notebook, the one from years ago. The cover is torn, the pages yellowed. He flips through them slowly. Messy handwriting, desperate notes, calculations that once felt like life or death. He stops at the line he wrote long ago. "This can't be it. There has to be more than this." He traces the words with his finger and whispers, "You were right." Then he adds one final sentence beneath it. "There always was. I just had to become someone who could see it." He closes the notebook for the last time. It doesn't feel like an ending. It feels like peace. Because that's what true wealth is, peace. Not the absence of problems, but the presence of perspective. He walks to the window, looking at the city lights, thousands of tiny suns burning in the dark, each one a story like his. Somewhere out there, someone sitting in the dark, whispering, "Next month will be better." Daniel hopes they're right, but more than that, he hopes they realize it's not next month that changes things. It's the moment you decide to stop surviving and start building. This story began when the lights went out. It ends with them still burning soft, steady, alive. Because wealth, when truly understood, is not about having more, it's about needing less, giving more, and knowing you are already enough. He breathes deeply, the city humming below, life unfolding all around him. And with quiet certainty, Daniel smiles and says to no one in particular, "I made it, not rich in money, rich in meaning."